Your stepdaughter tells you she's dying. The last thing you expect is to be caught in an elaborate lie. But that's exactly what happened to me last spring. And it cost me more than just money. It shattered my faith in family and forced me to question everything I thought I knew about love and trust. I'm Catherine Walsh, 52, married to Tom for the past 15 years. His daughter Ashley was 12 when we first met, and I'd spent years trying to be the perfect stepmother, supportive but not pushy, loving but respectful of boundaries. Now, at 27, Ashley had grown into a beautiful young woman with her father's charm and her late mother's delicate features. The day everything changed, I was in my home office reviewing client files for my real estate business when Ashley called, crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Can you come to the hospital?" she managed between sobs. "Please don't tell Dad yet. I need you." I'd never heard her sound so vulnerable. Despite our generally good relationship, Ashley usually went to her father first with any problems. This was different. An hour later, I sat in a sterile consultation room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, holding Ashley's trembling hands as she told me the news that would set everything in motion. "It's stage 4 pancreatic cancer," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They're getting me 6 months, maybe less." My world tilted on its axis. Ashley was young, healthy, had her whole life ahead of her. She'd just gotten engaged to James, her boyfriend of 2 years, and they were planning a small wedding for next year. "Oh, sweetheart," I pulled her into my arms, my own tears falling now. "We'll get other opinions, the best doctors, experimental treatments, whatever it takes." She shook her head against my shoulder. "I don't want to spend my last months in hospitals. I want to marry James. I want one perfect day before." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Of course," I said immediately. "We'll move the wedding up. Whatever you need." But I want it to be special. Ashley looked up at me, her green eyes swimming with tears. "The wedding I've always dreamed of. At the Peninsula Hotel, with the crystal ballroom and the garden terrace." "I know it's expensive. Don't worry about the money," I heard myself say. "I'll take care of everything." The Peninsula Hotel was one of Chicago's most exclusive venues, with a 2-year waiting list for weddings. But I had connections through my real estate work, and money could make things happen quickly. I'd have to sell my vacation home in Michigan, the one thing I'd kept from my life before Tom. But what was a house compared to giving my dying stepdaughter her dream wedding? Looking back, I should have seen the red flags. The way Ashley insisted on keeping her diagnosis secret from everyone except James and me. How she didn't want her father involved in the wedding planning. The convenient excuse that she didn't want him to worry to see him suffer through another loss after her mother's death from breast cancer 15 years ago. But grief and panic have a way of blinding you to things you might otherwise question. I threw myself into planning the perfect wedding, pulling every string I had to make it happen in just 6 weeks. The Peninsula's events manager was an old client who owed me a favor. The florist was a friend who agreed to work overtime. The designer boutique that had Ashley's dream dress made alterations their top priority after I explained the situation. Money flowed out of my accounts like water. The venue deposit alone was $50,000. The dress was another $15,000. Flowers, catering, music, decorations. Every time I turned around, there was another bill to pay. "Are you sure about this?" Tom asked one night as I reviewed the catering contract. "It seems like an awful lot for a wedding that's being planned so quickly." "She deserves it," I said firmly, not meeting his eyes. I hated lying to my husband, but I'd promised Ashley I wouldn't tell him about her diagnosis yet. And the Michigan house has been sitting empty anyway. It's time to let it go. The house sold quickly, the market was hot, and I priced it to move. The proceeds covered most of the wedding expenses, though I still had to dip into my retirement savings for the rest. Ashley threw herself into wedding planning with an enthusiasm that sometimes seemed at odds with her supposed condition. There were no visible symptoms of her illness, but I told myself that was the blessing of youth and good genes, that she was putting on a brave face. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was at Ashley and James' apartment, dropping off some samples for the table settings. They weren't home, but I had a key for emergencies. I was leaving the samples on their dining table when I knocked over Ashley's purse. As I picked up the scattered contents, a medical report fell out of a folder. My heart stopped as I read the letterhead. It was from Northwestern Memorial, dated just a few days ago. But it wasn't a cancer diagnosis. It was a pregnancy test. Positive. 12 weeks along. My hands shook as I read further. No mention of cancer. No terminal diagnosis. Just a routine prenatal checkup report showing a healthy mother and a healthy baby. The front door opened before I could process what I was seeing. Ashley walked in, stopped dead when she saw me holding the report. "I can explain," she said quickly, but her face told me everything I needed to know. There was no cancer. There never had been. I sank into a chair, the report crumpling in my grip. "Why?" was all I could manage to say. Ashley's face crumpled, but I couldn't tell if the tears were genuine or just another performance. "James's parents are super religious," she said, her voice small. "They would never accept a pregnant bride. We needed the wedding to happen quickly, before I started showing. And we couldn't afford the kind of wedding they'd expect from their only son." The room spun as the magnitude of her deception hit me. I'd sold my beloved lake house, the last connection to my late parents, the place where I'd spent every summer of my childhood. I drained my retirement account, all for a lie. "Does James know?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He had to be part of it. No one could fake that level of concerned devotion I'd seen from him these past weeks. Ashley nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "It was his idea to say it was cancer. He knew about your lake house, knew you'd do anything if he thought I was dying." The calculation in those words made me physically ill. They targeted my deepest fears, my love for my stepdaughter, my memories of her mother's death, all to fund their perfect wedding. But the worst was yet to come, because what Ashley said next would reveal an even darker side to their deception, one that would shake our family to its very core. "You don't understand," Ashley said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "James isn't just worried about his parents finding out about the baby. He needs this wedding to happen now because of the inheritance." I stared at her, still clutching the medical report. "What inheritance?" "His grandfather's trust fund. James stands to inherit $5 million. But there's a catch. He has to be married in a socially appropriate manner before he turns 30. That means a big wedding, at a prestigious venue, with all the right people attending. If he doesn't meet the requirements, the money goes to his cousin instead." The pieces started falling into place. "And when does he turn 30? "Next month," Ashley whispered, "right after the wedding." My mind raced back through everything I knew about James. The prestigious law firm job he just left to start his own practice. The expensive clothes and watches he somehow afforded on a starter lawyer's salary. The way he'd encourage Ashley to dream bigger for the wedding, knowing I would pay for it all. "So this was never about the baby," I said slowly. "You used my love for you, made me think you were dying. Also, James could get his hands on his trust fund." Ashley's face hardened slightly. "We're going to pay you back with interest. As soon as James gets the inheritance. Do you hear yourself?" I cut her off. "You faked having cancer, Ashley. Cancer. Do you have any idea how many families would give everything they have for their loved ones to not have that diagnosis? How many people are actually fighting for their lives right now?" She had the grace to look ashamed, but only briefly. "What's done is done. The wedding's in 2 weeks. Everything's paid for. You can't back out now. Watch me." I stood up, gathering the scattered contents of her purse. "I'm telling your father everything. If you do that," Ashley's voice turned cold, "I'll tell him about the affair." I froze. "What affair?" "The one you're having with Michael Bennett, Dad's best friend. I saw you having lunch with him last month at the Four Seasons. Very cozy." I almost laughed. "Michael Bennett is my real estate attorney. We were discussing the sale of my lake house. The one I sold to pay for your fake dream wedding. I have the billing records to prove it." "But Dad doesn't know that," Ashley countered. "And Michael's wife just left him. How do you think it would look? The secret meetings, the large bank transfers, the emotional distraction you've been showing lately." I sat back down, suddenly understanding the full scope of her manipulation. She'd planned this, created a backup story to keep me quiet if I ever discovered the truth. "When did you become this person?" I asked quietly. "What happened to the sweet girl who used to help me bake cookies for the homeless shelter? Who cried when she found injured birds in the garden?" Something flickered in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or just annoyance at being confronted with who she used to be. But before she could respond, we heard keys in the door again. James was home. He took in the scene, me with the medical report, Ashley's defensive posture, and his handsome face went blank. Not surprised, not angry. Just calculated. I see we're having a family discussion, he said smoothly, setting down his briefcase. Perhaps we should all talk this through calmly. There's nothing to discuss, I said, standing up again. The wedding's off. I'm calling the vendors tomorrow. James's smile didn't waver. That would be unwise, Catherine. You see, Ashley isn't the only one who's been watching and gathering information. He walked to his briefcase, pulled out a folder. Your real estate license is up for renewal next month. It would be a shame if the board received evidence of certain irregularities in your recent transactions. What irregularities? The lake house sale, for instance, sold well below market value, with some very creative accounting to avoid certain taxes. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation, but investigations can be so time-consuming and damaging to one's reputation. My blood ran cold. He'd been planning this too, documenting everything I'd done to quickly sell my house and fund their wedding. Actions that, taken out of context and twisted the right way, could indeed look suspicious. You're blackmailing me, I said flatly. We prefer to think of it as protecting everyone's interests, James replied. The wedding happens as planned. 2 weeks later, I receive my inheritance. We then buy you a new lake house. Larger, better location. Everyone wins. I looked between them, my stepdaughter and her fiancé, both watching me with a mixture of threat and false sympathy. In that moment, I saw them clearly for the first time. They were perfect for each other, but not in the way I'd originally thought. Okay, I said quietly. You win. The wedding goes forward. They both relaxed slightly, James's smile turning triumphant. I knew you'd see reason. But, I held up my hand, I have one condition. We tell your parents everything, James. Tonight. All of it. The baby, the trust fund requirements, everything. If they still want this wedding to happen, fine. But no more lies. Absolutely not, James snapped, his smooth facade cracking. My parents are coming to dinner at my house tonight. I finished for him. Ashley told me yesterday they'd accepted the invitation, so either you tell them or I will. They tried to argue, to threaten, to negotiate, but I stood firm. Either the truth came out on their terms or on mine. That night, over a dinner I could barely eat, James and Ashley confessed everything to his shocked parents. The pregnancy, the trust fund manipulation, the fake cancer diagnosis. What happened next surprised us all. James's father, a stern federal judge I'd only met twice, listened to the whole story in silence. Then he started to laugh. Did you really think we didn't know about the pregnancy? He asked his son. Your mother volunteers at that hospital. She saw Ashley's name on the patient list weeks ago. James went pale. But the trust fund requirements were meant to ensure you married someone you truly loved in a way that honored our family's values, his mother said quietly. Not to force you into an elaborate deception that hurt everyone around you. The money was never real, his father continued. The trust fund exists, yes, but the marriage clause was something I made up when I saw how materialistic you were becoming. I wanted to see what you would do, if you would choose love and honesty, or if you would scheme your way to what you wanted. The silence that followed was deafening. James looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Ashley was crying, but this time I thought the tears might actually be real. The wedding is canceled, I said into the silence. I'm calling everyone tomorrow. No one argued. The next few weeks were a blur of cancellations, refunds, and difficult conversations. I told Tom everything, showing him the evidence of Ashley's deception. He was devastated, not just by her lies, but by how calculated and cruel she'd been. Some vendors took pity on us and refunded their deposits. Others kept them, understandably. I lost about 60% of what I'd spent, including the lake house. But somehow, that didn't hurt as much as losing my faith in the daughter I thought I'd raised. Ashley and James broke up 2 months later. Without the prospect of millions, their perfect partnership crumbled. She moved back home, humbled and genuinely remorseful for the first time. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said one night, finding me in the kitchen after everyone else had gone to bed. But I want you to know that losing your respect hurts more than losing the wedding, the money, even James. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was 6 months pregnant now, showing clearly, her face stripped of the manipulative confidence she'd worn like armor. You know what the saddest part is? I said finally. If you just told me the truth from the beginning, about the baby, about wanting a nice wedding before you started showing, I would have helped. Not with selling my house, maybe, but I would have found a way, because that's what family does. I know that now, she whispered. I got caught up in James's dreams, his plans. I forgot who I was, who you raised me to be. Slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild. Ashley had her baby, a girl she named Catherine after me. It was a peace offering, a promise to do better, to be better. I never did get the lake house back, but last summer, Ashley found a small cottage for rent on the same lake, just a few miles from my old place. She used her savings to rent it for a month, invited me to spend time there with her and the baby. It's not the same, I know, she said as we sat on the deck, watching the sunset over the water. But maybe we can make new memories here. Better ones, built on truth this time. I looked at my granddaughter, sleeping peacefully in her carrier, and felt something heal inside me. Not everything, some broken trust can never be fully repaired, but enough to move forward, to find a new kind of relationship with my stepdaughter. People often ask me if I regret not exposing Ashley and James more publicly, not making them face bigger consequences for their deception. But the truth is, they are facing consequences. James lost not just his inheritance but his family's respect. Ashley lost her dream wedding, her perfect fiancé, and had to rebuild her life as a single mother. And me? I lost a house but gained wisdom. I learned that sometimes the people we love most can hurt us deepest. But that doesn't mean we stop loving them. We just love them differently, more carefully, with clearer eyes and stronger boundaries. Last week, I received a letter from James's mother. Inside was a check for half of what I'd spent on the wedding. "This doesn't make it right," she wrote, "but it's a start. Thank you for having the courage to tell us the truth. You saved not just your family, but ours too." I haven't decided if I'll cash the check yet. Part of me wants to use it as a down payment on a new